Explain like I'm 5 why do governments raise interest rates to slow the economy instead of tax rises? With interest rate rises, the people in the most debt suffer the most with tax rises. The highest paid suffer the most. And the government has extra revenue to help the ones struggling the most. This is never considered by any government. Why not? In most Western countries, interest rates are controlled by a central bank. They can unilaterally take action to address fiscal issues. Raising taxes is much more complicated and involves passing a bill through the legislature, which takes a lot of time and political capital. Can you imagine what the inflation situation would like if Congress was responsible for it? They would still be arguing over whether we should raise taxes or slash government spending for the poor. Edit reading to raising taxes. Because the interest rates are less about people's credit card debt and more about banks lending to each other and to businesses. Raising interest rates slows liquidity in the system, which slows loan growth and economic activity. Loan growth is the main way we have growth and inflation. Thank goodness Congress isn't in charge of interest rates. We'd all be stuck in an endless CSPAN loop. People don't like taxes and tend not to vote for politicians who raise them. People do not vote directly for the people who raise interest rates. Cheers for all the answers. I'm a Brit. Our central bank is independent. The government decides what they do and who the governor is, though. Because it's much simpler and effective. Imagine the red tape of rising taxes from the moment inflation starts to hit and up to the point where taxes even begin to have an effect. It's much quicker to raise the interest rates. Plus, no single government in turn would be willing to raise taxes for everyone in a swipe. That'd be politically impossible, or at the very least extremely controversial and unpopular. Good God. Can you imagine the government telling people they needed to slow the economy? And their plan was to take your next paycheck. The poor aren't hurt more unless they're trying to borrow life beyond their means. It's large core rich folk taking out new loans for various reasons that are hit by the rates. This slows their efforts due to the higher overall cost of buy-in. If government raises taxes, it doesn't remove money from the system. It goes from consumers and business deflationary to the governments, which can be used for infrastructure or social programs inflationary. Net effect is likely neutral unless they simultaneously reduce spending. Raising interest rates sucks money out of the system by discouraging debt. Debt is a form of money creation because borrower gets money and lender can sell the IOU like it's cash. Mostly good answers so far. Another problem is that everyone complains the government runs large deficits. Say they did raise taxes. Now the government has money. Well, here in the US the left would demand they spend that money on public services. The right would demand you cut taxes and give it back to taxpayers. Both have put money back into circulation, which is exactly what you're trying not to do. Tax raises usually don't come into effect until the next tax year and last for a year. Interest rates can be raised or lowered on a daily basis. They're just a way more flexible tool. Taxes tend to be used to discourage certain kinds of commerce, e.g., cigarettes or alcohol, and in some places are local rather than national. Banks touch many kinds of commerce. Interest rates are also more easily adjustable, though some tax hikes and cuts are also temporary. The stated intent of taxes tends to be to fund the government. The RBA or Reserve Bank in most demographic countries are not controlled by the government but an independent organizations so that political parties are not able to influence decisions made by the bank. Increasing tax would affect a response. One that might, and I use the term might, achieve a similar response. But it's not going to be popular with anyone. The government should raise taxes. Rich people have better lobbyists than poor people do. These lobbyists and campaign donations from rich people convince politicians that they should not raise taxes. What you're talking about using taxes instead of monetary policy to control the balance between inflation and unemployment is called modern monetary theory if you're looking for further reading. Not an explain like I'm 5, but then nothing else in this thread is. There's a little more to it than that. Sure, raising rates hurts people with adjustable rate loans. But most of the pain is felt through resulting layoffs. As for why rich people control the money and media and can therefore make or break politicians, poor people cannot. Actually, taxing rich people and then spending it on poors can increase inflation. Rich people don't consume much. They sit on their money or spend it on very expensive and stupid things. Inflation is increasing because average consumer demands average things like groceries more than available supplies. So unfortunately, taxing rich doesn't help here. This is same argument when economy is bad and need a boost. Cutting taxes doesn't boost economy as much as just giving money to poor people. The central bank only has one tool: raise interest rates. They'd used it for decades. So it's how it's always been done. That's why they do it. The government can't control interest rates. So they slash tax to help suffering families. And try to negate the effect of interest rates. Then the central bank gets angry. Raise interest rates again. X 200B. The government don't really care about inflation unless it affects things like job rates etc. that they may get voted out for. It would be just as efficient raising taxes. But those are the guys that own the politicians. You can't bite the hand that feeds you. I don't see anyone mentioning the fact that raising taxes doesn't actually slow the economy much. That's just part of the trickle-down economics myth. Lowering taxes doesn't accelerate the economy either. It is the obvious solution. The problem is that one political party campaigns on the fact the government can't do anything right and the disproven trickle-down economy via tax cuts. No one likes paying taxes. But one party is composed of bad actors that have no interest in doing the right thing. Tax cuts should be a reward for a surplus in tax revenue and low inflation. Without those conditions, tax cuts will always increase the deficit and potentially inflation due to increased money supply. Taxes are politically unpopular and congressmen are constantly worrying about re-election. The people who control the Fed and set interest rates are appointed to those positions and don't have to worry what the voting public thinks of them. The Federal Reserve, an independent body, can raise and lower rates and buy or sell bonds to influence the money duly without approval from Congress or the President. Raising and lowering taxes requires approval from the Congress, which is much more difficult. However, representatives from the Fed will sometimes appeal to Congress to take legislative action. Increasing taxes affects consumer spending much slower than increasing interest rates affects bank activity. Taxes are mostly for the people. Interest rates are mostly for the businesses. When you make it more difficult for businesses to loan money, they get it more difficult to operate, which in turn can slow down an economy that operates too fast and needs to be slowed down. This is often done to curb inflation.